This unit has been helpful for me in developing my approach to unit planning. Unpacking standards and backwards mapping are fairly new concepts to me. Most of my experience has been in following a textbook or designing lessons and units to fit a pre-existing curriculum without too much thought for the learning objectives. Sometimes writing objectives has been an afterthought, and the focus has been more on learning content for tests rather than focusing on process and skills. Unpacking standards is a useful starting point for lesson and unit planning. It helps us determine the precise skills and knowledge that are required by the standard, and also encourages us to identify where learning falls on Bloom's taxonomy. If we focus too much on the learning of facts and information, then our students don't have the opportunity to reach higher levels of learning. This should be kept in mind when setting learning objectives with verbs like compare, contrast, and evaluate, which enable students to go beyond the memorization of facts.
Over what we have. Okay, so once you have all of your nouns underlined, why don't we start going over?
I had area and perimeter.
Okay.
Rectangles.
I also had formulas in there as well.
Right, because they're talking about specific, knowing the formula. And they did specifically mention that it needs to be real-world problems and mathematical problems. So if we make a note of that. So let's move on to the verbs.
I had apply.
Apply,
Find.
find.
I also had view.
All right, so let's move on to our Webb's depth of knowledge. So looking at the verbs and the skills that the students need to be able to use in this particular standard, what level do we think that the students need to be operating on for this standard?
Once we have our learning objectives for the unit, we are ready to begin planning our lessons and learning experiences. One of my biggest mistakes in the past has been to approach planning like a timetable of minutes per activity. While time management is a key ingredient of effective planning, we should not overlook other important factors to plan for. These include big ideas and essential questions, strategies for differentiation, and the kinds of assessments we will use. It is crucial that we ask ourselves if each lesson is appealing to different learner profiles and contains sufficient scaffolding for students to meet standards, that we differentiate content, process, and product to meet individual student needs, and we reflect on our unit as a whole to consider if this is the best possible approach for the students and the standards. One of the keys to successful formative assessments is to integrate them smoothly into lessons for quick and constant feedback on student progress. We shouldn't wait until we receive homework, quizzes, or tests to monitor student understanding. Rather, we should devote time and attention in our lesson plans to formative assessments that gauge student readiness and mastery throughout the learning process and before summative assessments. The question of how to do this effectively without losing too much teaching time can be challenging, however. A mistake that rookie teachers often make is checking student understanding with questions that do not prove understanding or mastery. Has everyone got that? Or hands up if you don't understand are the kinds of assessment that often tell us nothing about students' actual progress. The most effective formative assessments usually involve a demonstration of knowledge that allows the teacher to adjust or proceed with the lesson accordingly. In the video Managing Transitions, Ms. Noonan demonstrates how formative assessments can be integrated into the lesson structure with techniques like her grab bag quiz. This activity combines formative assessment with a smooth and practiced class transition, which is an excellent way to maximize teaching time.
Another way we transition is through a grab bag quiz.
I'm gonna dismiss you in your groups. In order to get back to your group, you need to answer a grab bag quiz question. I am looking for the capital of a state in the Mid-Atlantic region, Maryland. Adeline.
The capital of Maryland is Annapolis.
How do you feel about that class? Let's see Raven, Pup head back to their desks. Let's see how they do. I like how they're walking really quietly.
I'll think of a question that we've already covered, be it geography, math, science, reading, and ask students to answer that.
I see the red folders coming out. Awesome. Eyes back up here. Looking for what 1/3 is as a percent. Daniel, your hand just shot up. Nice try.
1/3 as a percent is 33%.
How do you feel about that class? Seeing a lot of agreement?
So here,
Effective lesson planning, like many other skills, is something that is more easily discernible in its absence. That is to say, the well-planned lesson is one in which scaffolding enables every student to keep pace, transitions between activities are managed smoothly, and differentiated activities allow students to meet standards at a level that fits their needs. Failures in lesson planning tend to result in more noticeable, often chaotic results. Some students cannot keep up, while others have already finished their work. Both groups begin misbehaving. An ill-conceived activity is over before it has even started or stretches on far too long. All teachers have experienced disastrous lessons that could have been presented with better planning. My own experience of co-teaching in a Korean-English dual-language system has provided me with excellent opportunities for observing a qualified teacher day in, day out. I have learned a lot from observing these lessons, even though they were delivered in a language I do not speak. Good teaching is universal, and they were happy to explain different strategies that they used. The first and most important aspect of lesson planning that should be obvious but can be overlooked is to make sure you know exactly what you're teaching. This relates to learning objectives, as discussed earlier, but also to the content that you're going to teach. Often, as teachers, we need to brush up on aspects of our knowledge and prepare for those difficult questions that can come up. Working in a department and preparing for standardized testing often requires collaboration between members to ensure that everyone is on the same page and working towards the right goals. Unpacking standards, setting objectives, and designing units can all benefit from a collaborative approach, as we saw in the video on Common Core standards earlier. Although the Korean education system is known for its somewhat traditional pedagogy, I have also observed a great deal of cooperative learning at the Korean school I worked at. It is true that students in every classroom sit in rows of desks facing the teacher, but they will frequently rearrange the desks into different configurations for various collaborative activities. Seating plans are generally changed once a month, and the effect I observed is a class of 30-odd students who are all accustomed to working with any classmate and producing excellent group work. One of the keys to student engagement, I believe, is planning lessons that incorporate a wide range of activities with a good mix of independent, pair, and group work.
This is a round robin structure and it's universal, so you can use it with any activity. It's very easy to fit in and it actively engages every student at some point, either active listening or engaged in talking. In this case, I used it as a review of the chapter we read the previous week to help them get back on track before we start the new chapter. Each student participates by sharing something that they learned from the chapter while the other team members are actively listening because they're not allowed to repeat what somebody else has said, and they may use the books that are provided for them. So this way they each come up with a new idea that they've learned from the chapter, and they're prepared for when I then call on each team to share something as a whole class review, and then we're already ready to move on to the next chapter.